Hey guys, this is of course the powervoices.com and I'm your host Greg Bell, the Legends Community Show. And I tell you what guys, this is going to be somewhat of a fun-filled day. Um, how do you say this? We're in a situation here where we're going to be talking a little Trump, a little football. I hope I don't get kind of overblown on what's going on in the world of protests. If you haven't really looked up to the word protest, I would ask you to do that because there's so much we have to talk about right now. Um, Definitely, we got to talk about Trump tweeting. With your Ram fan, you got to be happy right now because the Rams got a big win this weekend. So we're truly ecstatic about that. Man, we're going to talk about the Raiders a little bit. Not sure what I saw from the Raiders this week, but those games exist, guys. If you play football long enough, you're going to have one of those days where you just get your butt kicked. And that's pretty much what the Raiders got this past weekend. They got their butt kicked. And that we'll talk about that to some extent. But, before I jump in deep with the protest, I got to say something. And I want to say this because I had a chance last night, to kind of share some views with a couple of my friends as well as some of the people on Facebook. And we talked about just what's going on as a whole right now. And the one thing I think everybody has to do is we got to take a step back. There's been such turmoil going on this past year. It's almost where do you stop and start to think about what's going on and how this world is changing very fastly. I mean, this is changing so rapidly. We go from uh, Colin Kaepernick to the American flag. And so much is being lost in conversation here. And I want to kind of take a little bit of time, chime in, guys. I'm looking at you here on the Facebook wire. Chime in if you can, because I want to kind of take us back to when Colin Kaepernick first started his protest. Okay, first he started with a sit, then he took a knee, and I want to kind of go back to talk about really where I stood when it all started. And the first thing I want everybody to remember: our United States as it is was founded on protests. That's the one thing we all have to remember. From the first Boston Tea Party, it was a violent protest. That was not nonviolent. And that's another thing that I want to kind of point out to everybody. There are two different types of protests that we're seeing here. A violent one, and that kind of led to war, and a nonviolent one, like a Martin Luther King, where the only thing violent was the stones that were being thrown at him. So when you start to think about what's going on in the National Football League, and we talk about what's going on through social media, that's the big thing that's different from all these other protests. All of a sudden now we have what's called social media, and your phone, your cameras, all these different ways of getting information out to the world. And the one thing I think that I kind of stepped back and looked at is that the fact that Colin did something that he put not only his job on the line, he put his image on the line for, and it probably was what I think he started out believing was a solid protest. Now, I will say this with no reservation: the socks, the Castro shirt, those were, in essence, negatives that goes towards his protest. He started out with a good message. He wanted to talk about equality, not just, and I want to make sure I point this out properly, not just for black people, from where I said, he said for minorities. So we're talking about Hispanics, blacks, Asians, any parts, people that are of mixture that we call minorities. Why we use that term is another label that, we'll talk about that as we talk about this show as a whole. But when Colin started his protest, I believe that his message was being missed from day one. And now, a year later, the protest has now grown into a unification where the teams, the NFL, in answering to Donald Trump, not to Colin Kaepernick's request, to that we start to communicate better as people, because that's the number one thing I think has been lost of everything that Colin Kaepernick was trying to say, is that he wanted us to open up open dialogue, have true conversation to talk about what's going on in society today. So much is going wrong, and now it's starting to come back, and it's starting to look more not necessarily about disrespect, but now it's starting to become racial slurs. I'll talk about what happened in Pittsburgh. I'll talk about an email that I saw today that really, at one point I thought it said immigrants, but it said ingrates. But even to call NFL ball players ingrates is really kind of jumping a little further than you should really think about, because, I mean, I hate to say this, the National Football League in the mid-'90s did something that a lot of people don't tend to realize, and they really never start to really look at the depth of it until I talk about it to a lot of people. And is that was that the United States Armed Forces, and that's militaries of all sorts, Navy, Army, Marines, Reserve, all of them, National Guards, they started throwing money to the National Football League to get their players to show patriotism. And there's nothing wrong with showing patriotism. I think the one thing I know from being around these NFL ball players, and myself included, I think we have more respect for guys in the Navy, in the National Guard, for all the armed forces, especially for the Navy SEALs guys, because we know what they go through. We dedicate our bodies, our minds, our souls to a task that is physical, not always typically mental, but it also incorporates the mental part as well. And so we know how much the armed forces puts their life on the line for a lot of us back here in the United States. Anybody who goes and joins an armed forces, we understand that commitment, because you're actually taking your life at risk for people who you don't know and don't really even have care for, but it's a duty that you have sworn on to do. And so Colin Kaepernick, when he demonstrated the pigs on the socks, the Castro shirt, and some of the little things that he did, those were the negatives that I think a lot of people jumped on board. That just gave them an additional cause of conversation to talk about disrespecting the flag. But it's amazing to me, and I told somebody that when I was a kid, people talked about patriotism, and then they talked about what we did. I don't think I ever, when I was a kid, said the national anthem. And I know for a fact when I played in the National Football League, I never stood in attention to the national anthem because we were in the locker room in the 80s. We weren't out there like the guys are today, because what happened in the mid-'90s? They threw $5 and $10 million. I mean, multi-million dollars were being thrown to the National Football League to line those guys up on the sideline and do the flyover. Why? Well, pretty simple. The National Guards, the American Armed Forces did their studies. They did their statistics. They found out that when we stood on that sideline, and when I say we, I'm talking National Football League players and owners and National Football League clubs, when they stood on that sideline, more men and women enlisted to sign up into the national government arms, the armed forces, okay? More of them were signing up by seeing the guys stand there and showing patriotism. So what's happened over the last 2 decades? Millions of dollars have gone into the owners' pockets, not into just to say players' pockets, but gone into the billionaires that have been created through this game. And all of a sudden, it becomes patriotism to honor the flag. And it dawned on me, I remember when I was a kid, if a flag touched the ground, you had to burn that flag. You didn't keep that flag. If a flag was made into a bathing suit, it was disrespectful. So I kind of got amazed of all the things that it wasn't one of them. And so I kind of back, why have we taken the message of equality and just, to talk about the killings that are happening on our streets by some of the police force and by unjust reasons, I mean, it's almost a shame when you got it videotaped and you see a guy doesn't have his, or he gets down on the ground, he has his arms up, he lays down and you shoot him anyway. when he's just there as a medical assistant. Or, like I read an article today of a young African-American kid, a middle school kid, walking with his saxophone. Not in the case. He was walking with his saxophone. And he was shot because he wouldn't put his saxophone down on the ground. And the cop said, and this really bothered me a little bit. The cop said, he wouldn't put his saxophone down. It looked like an AK-47. And so it was a justifiable shooting. And then the cop, when they asked the cop, well, what did you expect? What were you looking for? He said, well, the kid should have had a basketball in his hand. A little African-American kid walking with a saxophone, but he should have had a basketball. It's comments like that. It's comments like the sheriff, or I should say the chief of the fire department in Pennsylvania, who called Tomlinson the nigger word. It's all of a sudden gone from let's get together to talk about equality to now we're starting to throw race in there. And we're starting to be, pulled into this whole thing about disrespecting the flag. And it blew my mind because I told somebody when I was a kid and was raised in the United States, I was told the people are what made this country great. I was never told that the flag made us great. It was the people and the people, our resilience that made us great, that allowed us to fight on, that made us the greatest army or navy in the world. It was our resilience. They never talked about it, the flag. And then when you think about it, and I haven't seen one report that they discuss the fact that when we went to Vietnam or we went to Korea and people protested that, there were whites, there were blacks, there were all types of people burning flags. And they're not doing that now. We've taken a kneeling position and we've turned it into a disrespecting of the flag. And that's the one thing I think every NFL ball player has tried to say publicly, but nobody's even attempting to listen. And yes, there's people listening to them talk about that, but it just breaks my heart because I read these comments and, even though I'm not playing in the National Football League now, and I haven't been for a while, I'm still a former, Ram player. I'm still a former NFL guy. So what those guys go through, it feels like it's part of what we go through because we're part of that Legends community that are there for these young guys. And, I read something and it was probably one of those things where I couldn't even fathom someone saying this, but because the NFL is 75% African American, someone tweeted or I read it on Facebook where they said some of these millionaires need to go back into the inner city and help these fatherless boys make better decisions. And it dawned on me right at that point, everybody's truly making this a racial issue. And it's blowing my mind at how racial it's become because here all of a sudden we talked about equality. And let's remember, some of these senseless killings have been on some whites. And let's remember, there are fatherless white families, Asian families, Hispanic families. Their fathers, that just happens in the United States, unfortunately. There are kids who are growing up without fathers in their daily lives, but let's not make a mistake about it. The fact that I'm from a single family home, my dad was still there and he was still my best friend. So just because the family unity wasn't together didn't mean that the father wasn't there. Because I know a lot of fathers who helped raise their kids and some fathers who actually raised their kids. But that's a moot point because it had nothing to do with the initial conversation that Colin Kaepernick was trying to make. And it blows me away when I keep hearing people talk about how it's disrespectful. Disrespecting the flag is disrespecting our troops. And I don't know how you can say it more than once, twice, or three times. A lot of these guys have more respect for those military men than some of them have for their direct family. Maybe for even their fathers or their mothers. They have a lot of respect for the military men. And that's the one thing I want to make sure we get across tonight. If you have a comment about it, please let me know. I'm seeing your scrolls are coming through, so I do see them. Hit me with something that's made. Tell me what your thoughts are, because the problem I'm having here is that our society over this past year is becoming so decisive and so uh, just evil. It's that's all I can say. And I'm not going to do like most people, because everybody, the first thing they're going to say is, it's because of Donald Trump. And it's not just because of Donald Trump. Donald Trump isn't the white supremacist group. Now, has he denounced them? That could be an issue. Donald is doing some things that puts a cloud on his leadership. I mean, I don't think, if I get in front of the public and I start cursing to people and calling them SOBs and MFs or whatever, you're going to look down on me as a person that, oh, he's not very respectful. But when we say that to the leader of our free nation, you can't say that. Nobody's supposed to say, hey, Donald, that's not a respectful thing to say. When he talks about grabbing crotches, that's not a respectful thing to say, but nobody points those things out. And when we do point them out, the first thing that comes back is, hey, this has nothing to do with running the country. Okay. Well, we got to clean some of that up as well. And I think a thing that has to be cleaned up is dealing with, the Billionaires Club. Was it the right choice of the National Football League owners, I should say, to step out and decide that, okay, this week we're going to answer Donald Trump? My personal answer was no. Who cares what the president had to say about your protests? It's almost like when, King Louis was protesting us throwing the tea off the boat. Did anybody stop to say, oh, the king said that we shouldn't be throwing this tea off the boat? They really didn't care. It was a violent protest that they meant to make a difference and make a change. And so part of what I'm trying to get across to everybody is, one, protests are what they are. That's how our country was actually built. That's why we are here as Americans, I guess you can say, because this land was here and it was owned by, and had we not protested and asked for our own individual leadership, we'd still be under the government of the UK, if you really think about it. We fight back right for people to protest. I think it's people just look. And Aaron, I somewhat agree with you without a doubt. I think people are looking for an opportunity to take the light away from what is truly trying to be said here, and that's Colin Kaepernick's protest and what's going on in society. It had nothing to do with dishonoring the flag, dishonoring the military, really dishonoring our president. It really had to do with the fact that he wanted to open up lines of communication, that we as a people start to communicate better and talk about it. Now, I think so many people have taken the protest, the kneeling, they've taken away exactly what the protest was meant to be about, and they've kind of taken it in a whole new path, and that path is to talk about disrespect. And I don't think there's anything disrespectful about kneeling. I'll say this point blank. I don't have a problem kneeling for the flag, just like I don't have a problem kneeling for my prayers. And I have a devout, that's a position I have no problem being in, because I bow to Christ and I don't have any problem bowing to something that's greater than me. No one's even talked about the fact that I love when people talk about their allegiance. I remember one of the things I had to answer last night, and if you just joined me, this is, of course, Greg Bell. This is the Legend Community Show. Kind of, unfortunately, we're not talking a ton of sports, but we got to talk about what's going on in society in sports, and of course, that's the protest. You're listening to thepowervoices.com, and one of the things I had to explain to a lot of people last night was, as a kid and still in many schools today, we do not have a pledge to the national anthem. As a matter of fact, I don't even remember reading the national anthem when I was in school. We read the Pledge of Allegiance. They talk about putting your hand on your heart. That was the Pledge of Allegiance. It was not the national anthem. So the national anthem did not become what it is today until the armed forces paid to have that privilege. And that's something that we have to remember. Back in the 80s, they played the national anthem. I don't even know if people stood for the national anthem, because I was in the locker room getting ready to come out for the opening address. So all of a sudden, the national anthem is turned into this very vivid, you have to pledge your allegiance to the national anthem. And that's not really what it is. It's a song that it started as a poem. And the more you learn about the poem of the national anthem, the less you like it. It's amazing how, in church, they have all the versions of the song. When you go to church, you open up the biblical, you open up the hymn book. And when you're reading Ode to God, how great thou art, they show you all three, sometimes all four verses. It's amazing how we only show two verses of the national anthem from the poem, because they made it a point to pull the third part of the poem out. And if you haven't done your history, do it, guys, because it blew my mind. That's the one thing I kind of preach to kids all the time. You got to learn history. That's the only way to see where you're going to go in the future is know history. So read the national anthem. You'll understand why some people pull back away from it. You'll understand why some people like it. But it is our nation's song. And I was told that back in the 60s, like 68, 67, some people wanted to repeal that song and remove it from our national song. That's another history lesson you got to learn about. But it was something that was talked to me about, so I'm still learning as I speak to you today. But learn about the national anthem. There are more than the verses that we actually sing. And when you read them from a slave standpoint, you understand why people don't want to honor the national anthem. But at the same time, it is a song that has been created to honor our country, not to honor our troops. Because I think if you've seen my Facebook posting over the last couple of days, I posted something from Bob Costas. Bob Costas had a great CNN interview when he talked about patriotism. And he talked about the fact that when did the United States patriotism only be labeled to our military? And he talked about the fact that teachers are people that we should have patriotism for. Doctors, lawyers, people that serve others above self. Those are patriots of ours. That's what the American dream, the American society was built on. And Bob made such a keen view of that. I made sure that I posted it. So if you get a chance, go back, take a look at my post. Bob Costas just made such a vivid picture of what true patriotism is. It's not standing up at a football game and watching a flyby and saying, oh, this is patriotism. That's not patriotism. That's just the spirit of the moment. And it's a song that we sing now, and we've paid singers like Whitney Houston and Madonna and Prince and all the rest of them to do a one-time glory song for us. By no means is that the only sign of patriotism. And I hope you get a chance, watch the full video to see. It's about 21 minutes, but about 5 minutes you can hear his direct comments about patriotism to the military. And Bob wasn't trying to say or do anything negative. He was basically making a point that true patriotism comes in all forms and all facets. It's just not our United States military. There are teachers, our doctors, our lawyers, a lot of people who are saving and serving people above self are all part of the Patriotism Act. And so I think one of the things that we just gotten so lost with right now, and it's happened over the last 6 months, it wasn't there 12 months ago. All we talked about was Colin and how wrong he was. But here's the thing with patriotism that I want to make sure everybody gets a keen understanding of. When you're a patriot and when you're protesting, let me say it that way. When Colin is protesting, he's not trying to protest so that you like what he's doing. It's meant to cause the blood to curdle, to boil. And it's meant to get you to have conversation, to put it on your mind, make it the first thing you think about. And so right now I'm looking at you and I'm telling you, Colin Kaepernick, you were successful in your protest. He's made it a point of our daily conversation. And it's crazy because Trump spends most of his day talking about this protest. And that's not really what his day should be spent on. It should be spent on Puerto Rico. It should be spent on what are we going to do about North Korea. But the part of the protest has been laid down. And you have to look at Colin Kaepernick right now and say, yeah, you might be blackballed from the league. You may never play another down. But that was the sacrifice that he was willing to make to put that word out into the minds of the America. And it's out. It's without a doubt, it's out there. Whether you like it or you can hate it, you can like it. Doesn't make a difference. A person who's going to make a protest is doing something and he's making a sacrifice. And I have to honor him for his sacrifice. Now, some of the things that went with that sacrifice, like I told you, I wasn't in line for. The fact with, the pigs on the stocks dressed in police outfits, Fidel Castro's shirt, things of that nature might have taken him back a couple steps. But the goal that he was trying to do when he started his protest, you've got to honor the man for what he's done. He's caused Americans to stop, think, and actually start to react to what he wanted to see them react to. Unfortunately, so much is being deterred and turned and made into a disrespectful comment or disrespectful act. And then none of it, I don't think any of that is really part of what the protest was about. I really think these players are really trying to get people to see that the equalities that some people on this country, on this earth here that we call America, don't have the same equalities that others have. And yes, we all know money makes a life a little different, but it shouldn't give you any less or any more acceptance or opportunity in terms of life. And I think that's really what he's saying, because I know for a fact, guys, in the past year, we've seen a lot of shootings on tape. And we've seen a lot of murders on tape, and nobody's going to jail for these murders. When there's no gun and there's no act, and a person dies in the fact, something went wrong. And sometimes you just got to make amends. You got to be honest and say what it was. And in some cases, these were just, they were just straight murders. Guys, you're listening to thepowervoices.com. I'm your host here of the Legends Community Show, Greg Bell. I do want to throw out some shouts, and we got to talk a little bit of sports. I know I've kind of drowned you guys down and probably upset some people at the same time, but let's run through some of the scores from this weekend's game. Let's go back to that Thursday night game, because that's a game that I definitely want to talk about. The Los Angeles Rams get a 41-39 win over the San Francisco 49ers. And for most of you guys, if y'all don't know, that was probably the first time in 4 outings that the Rams have actually beaten the 49ers. So if you're a Ram fan, you got to be a little excited for that. But more excited from my standpoint is the fact that Todd Gurley got his first 100-yard game in over, I want to say, 19 or 20 months. Jared Goff threw for 292 yards. But, guys, it was really the Todd Gurley show. Todd actually came out and started showing that flashes, like I told people. And a lot of times people ask me, what do you see in Todd Gurley? I said the one thing I see is a lot of ability. And, when he was in St. Louis, that rookie year, he made things happen. It wasn't where the hole was there for him, or, he had to do this or do that. He made plays single-handedly. I think that's what you're starting to see from Todd right now. He knows he's got to put the load on his shoulders to take the pressure off of Jared Goff. Jared Goff is not going to come in and light it up for 400 yards passing every week. He's a 200-300-yard passing. And here's the thing about Jared Goff. That's what Alex Smith is. He's a game manager. And he's doing a great job for Kansas City right now. And he's done a great job for not only Kansas City, but he did a great job for San Francisco. He's not the Drew Brees, the Tom Brady, or even the Ben Roethlisberger. Jared Goff right now is still learning his way around the National Football League. And more importantly, he's feeling the pressure of trying to carry a team that's coming out of the cellar. And I can only tell you, I know what he's going through. See, what people tend to forget, when you're a number 1 draft pick and you're the first through 8 teams pick, you're going to a losing team. You're not going to a powerhouse. And so all of a sudden, all of the pressure, all of the demand is put on you. And being a first-round draft pick and being the first pick of the draft is twice the pressure that most first-rounders will ever go through. So Jared Goff right now is going through, basically purgatory. Basically, he's in between heaven and hell, because it can go either way on any given Sunday. And for him last Thursday, it went in the positive direction. The Rams came out, played an extremely positive game, Aaron Donald showed why he should be getting paid sometime soon. And the defense actually stepped up. Now, people will sit there and say, well, Greg, they gave up 39 points. You know what? They played well enough to win. That's the number one thing. I don't care how many fumbles. I don't care how many interceptions were dropped or this or that. The fact of the matter is, at the end of the day, the Rams are scoring more points than their opponents. And the funny thing about the Rams right now that most people probably don't even realize is that they're the number one scoring team in the NFL right now. You know, they're they are averaging a little over 35 points a game. And that's number one in the NFL right now. So if you're a Ram fan, you're ecstatic. You're getting salivating at the mouth. You're ready to go out and play Dallas this week. Dallas came back and got themselves a win. But right now, if you're a Rams fan, don't get overexcited, but be optimistic, because this Rams team is showing the positive that we were hoping that we would get by bringing in McVay. And then our defense, although not as stout as we would hope, they're doing what all defenses are meant to be. You know, they bend, but they don't break. And right now, I tell you what, coming into the season, I don't know if I would have said they would have been 2-1 after 3 games. Because I tell you what, coming into the season, like I guarantee there's not a person sitting out there would have said the Rams would be close to being 3-0. And they're 1 game away from that right now. And of course, they're going out to Dallas this week. Dallas got themselves a win. And that was it was a pretty interesting game if you watch Dallas's game on Monday night. And I don't know how many of you guys watched. The way that game started out, I was ready to turn the TV off after the first quarter. Dallas came out, and they just did not look like the Dallas that we expected to see this year. That struggled. The Cardinals looked like they walked up and down the field with ease. But in the end, Dallas came out the second half, and that's pretty much what every great team is capable of doing. Something that Bill Belichick has been the master of for many years now. He gets in there in halftime, he makes adjustments. The Cowboys made the adjustment. Dak Prescott came out, looked like the Dak Prescott that won the Rookie of the Year last year. They came back from a 7-0 first quarter, tied it up in the second, and basically took over in the third and fourth, putting up another 21 points in the second half, beating the Cardinals 28-17. If you're a Raider fan, let's talk. Don't know what I saw this weekend, but it wasn't what I expected by any means. The Raiders are a better team than was demonstrated on the field this week. One of the things I can tell you, you sometimes have emotional letdowns in the National Football League. Anybody can have them. David Carr, you pray your quarterback never has them, but I think he had an emotional letdown this week. Probably after that second interception, the game was kind of, let's just manage the game right now. This is a Raider team that, at the beginning of the season, I predict them to win the Super Bowl, not to make it. I predicted the Raiders would probably get to the Super Bowl and win. I felt they were the only team in the National Football League capable of going up against going up against New England and putting a beating on New England. But the Raiders are going to have to do some real deep searching. They've done some things that probably many of us can't figure out. You had a holdout at tackle, you get him back in, and then you give him the money that you probably should have given him during the summer, and he would never held out. Some of these things are managerial positions that we always have to deal with. But one of the things I can tell you, I like the Raiders. I think this team is going to be a good team. I think it's one that's going to go deep into the playoffs. And yes, Lisa, I see it. Todd is a beast, and he ran like a beast this week. But the Raiders are going to be a strong team all season long. I think this is one of those emotional kind of letdowns for the Raiders. The one thing I do know well is Jack Del Rio will get this team back on course. They're a strong team, guys. I mean, I saw them all summer, and the Raiders are my pick from the AFC to make it to the Super Bowl. And in the NFC, coming into the season, of course, I'm going to always say the Rams. But being honest and straightforward, my pick probably was going to be Dallas. But Dallas isn't playing like the Dallas I saw last year. They've got to do some things to kind of bounce back and get themselves going. Now, Also in Los Angeles, since we got the Los Angeles teams, and this is LA, and I got to talk about them a little bit. I don't know what you say for the Chargers right now. Chargers fell to the Chiefs 24-10, and at no point in that game did the Chargers ever look like they were in it. And it's almost sad to say. You make the move from San Diego to LA, and you bring this product with you. They've got a long way to go to get the fan support here. I'm not even going to talk about the fact that they're playing in a 29,000 seat stadium, and they only can get 18,000 people to come. I got people throwing tickets to me saying, hey, you want 2 tickets? I'll donate them to the foundation. Guys, this is National Football League. And the Chargers are really, the first 2 games, I'll be honest. The kicker didn't, he was wide left and he got 1 block. That happens in life. They were competitive in the first 2 games. At this point, their letdown is not only mental, but it's emotional as well. This Charger team hasn't put themselves back in the right gear. With a new coach, a new staff, you thought that there would have been a little bit more enthusiasm coming out of this team to start the season. But very, very mild enthusiasm coming out of I want to call them the San Diego Chargers. And I don't know. You tell me as a LA fan, do we have to call them the LA Chargers? I don't know. I'm just sitting back kind of wondering. Also, the Bengals continue to struggle as well. And I'm saying to myself, and for some of you guys, you might not like this, but I want to see Joe Mixon play a little bit more for the Bengals. At this point, you might as well start him. He had a great preseason for you guys. I think he's a dynamic young running back who has good vision. Get him out there, let him play a little bit more than what you're doing. Packers knock off the Bengals 27-24. And Aaron Rodgers continues to look like, the solid quarterback that he is. Continues to he burned them deep a couple different times. Even, the fact that it had to go into overtime, the Bengals seemed to struggle the entire game. Up in Seattle, I don't know what to say, but Seattle's 1-2. Of course, since they're conference rivals of the Rams, the more they lose, the better the Rams look, right? They fall to the Titans 33-27. And you got to give it to Mariota. He's starting, when this kid came into the league, many people thought because he came out of that spread offense in Oregon that he wouldn't make a good pro quarterback. Boy, how the minds changed on that. He's not only a solid quarterback, he's one of the better especially young quarterbacks. And this kid's going to stay around for another, 11, 12, 13 more years. He might be the next Drew Brees the way he's playing in Tennessee. The Panthers fall to the Saints 34-13. And I'll tell you what, I don't know if it's Cam or I don't know if he's still injured, but he doesn't look like the same Cam Newton that was the league MVP 2 years ago and took him to the Super Bowl 2 years ago. And that's just talking about Cam as an individual. If he's hurt, don't have him out there. I mean, let's face it. Indianapolis right now is probably the worst team in the league, but they get a win over the Browns 31-28. And Oliver Luck, man, how bad is that? Andrew Luck, Oliver's son, is still on the IR. I mean, he's PUP, physically unable to perform right now, but they're winning games without him. And that's, Carolina's got to think. If Cam's not 100% ready to go, because he doesn't look like the same Cam Newton. And that's something with it. And because of that, he's going to sustain more injuries than most quarterbacks. So, I don't know. Watching the game this weekend, I wasn't Cam Newton's performance at all. Of course, the Patriots roll over the Texans 36-33. The Texans started out fast this season. I think they're going to be okay. The Patriots are what the Patriots are. One of the best teams in the National Football League in the history. This franchise has put themselves on the same plateau that the 49ers are on, that the Pittsburgh Steelers are on, with multiple Super Bowls. Them beating you early in the season doesn't make a difference because they're going to beat a lot of teams. Probably pretty much 98% of the teams they're going to beat. They're not going to have a week 1 letdown anymore. I can guarantee that. Tom Brady has this team ready to roll every week, week in and week out. The Vikings down the Bucks. Now here's one for the ages. 34-17. Didn't see that coming. And if you're a Ram fan, you got to say, man, were we smart? I mean, I said this last year, guys. Case Keenum is a quality backup quarterback, but he can also be a quality starter. Through 3 touchdown passes, I mean, he looked as fine as Sam Bradford does. And let's face it, both of these guys are former Ram quarterbacks, and they're leading the Vikings on a road towards the possibility of playing in the NFC Champion. I mean, this team has a good, solid team, and I don't even have to tell you about Dalvin Cook. I love the running back. I'm a running back lover, so trust me when I say I enjoy watching Dalvin Cook. The Jets down the Dolphins 20-6 this past weekend. And guys, before we get out of here, the last team I got to talk about is the New York Giants and Eli Manning. Okay, where are we at with Eli Manning? I want to know what you guys have to say about Eli at this stage of the game. Eli is starting to look old. I hate to say it like that, but that's just the truth of the matter. This guy is starting to actually look a little old behind the center, and he's not moving. He can't do anything right now. I mean, he's sitting back trying to throw, and he's finding himself. I mean, anytime you get more than 4 sacks in one game, that's because your quarterback just is a stationary target. And Eli is actually looking very old behind that center, and I'm wondering if it's time for them to start looking for a quality replacement. I'm not even sure who their backup is right now because, they went through a couple guys just preseason. But Eli is actually starting to look a lot older than even Peyton did towards this time in his career. And, you hate to replace a star like Eli. Eli has been a great quarterback for the New York Giants. 2 Super Bowl rings, more than his brother had before he actually left and went to the Denver Broncos. I mean, Eli was winning games when Peyton was winning records. That was the difference. Which one do you want? You want the record or you want the Super Bowl? And for Eli, he was delivering the Super Bowls. But right now, Eli is not looking Eli Manning-like. His feet are slow. His release is slow. He can't seem to make the adjustments. And with a new coach who was brought in a couple years ago for the fact that he's supposed to get this kid playing at the level that he's supposed to play at. So it's pretty interesting to watch Eli right about now. Bear with me right now. I don't want to run out of juice while we're here on the wire, so I got to replace some things while I'm sitting here. But stick with me. I'm going to do my little thing here. I got to make sure my computer don't die. I'm sitting here talking, having a lot of fun talking to everybody, but I got to make sure that the computer stays alive while I'm here talking with you guys. Let me get it plugged in. Oh, goodness. Hold on one second. I have to. Don't want to do that one. Don't laugh with me, guys. I'm trying to do more than I'm accustomed to. Either way, going back to our earlier discussion, of course, you're listening to the Legends Community Show here on the Power of Voices. I'm your host, Greg Bell. I want to go back. We talked about it earlier, guys, and I'm not going to dwell on it, but it's in everybody's talk right now. Everybody's talking about one thing, and I would be remiss if I didn't talk about it as well. And of course, we're talking about the protests. Where do you stand on the protests? How do you feel about the protests? Are you with it? Are you for it? What is your belief in the protest? As I told you, when the protests got started, I had the belief that Colin had a good message. He was trying to do the right thing and trying to bring everybody into a conversation to talk about the inequalities that he's seeing as an individual. And he was willing to sacrifice a lot. And guys, let's just take a vote. How many of you guys would have given up a $20 million contract to put your name on the line for something that you really have no control over? Colin did that. He did it with a lot of passion, and he's put his money where his mouth is. I told people earlier I was reading this week. I just keep reading blogs and reading Facebooks and all the other things, listening to people talk about the fact that, some of these players need to go back into the inner city and help fatherless sons and all. It's just so much rhetoric being said right now. I think the message that needs to stay there is that he's trying to get people to have awareness. He's trying to bring everybody together and talk about the inequities that he sees as an individual. And his protest was really being about the fact that he wanted to bring around change. And now that you're starting to see more and more what everyone's talking about, you got to ask yourself how much change is really there. How much have we really changed in the last 20, 30 years? When you see some of the comments that people are talking about, and I told you, I don't want to be the person that points the finger at Donald Trump because I don't think this is just a Trump issue. Uh, has he opened the gate for it or opened the door to allow some things in? Without a doubt. His comments of calling the players SOBs has led people to do things that I'm sure they never thought they would ever do. I mentioned earlier the guy from Pittsburgh, the fire chief, calling Tomlinson the N-word. And then not only did he call it the N-word, the funny thing afterwards, and I don't know if I want to say it's a funny thing, he didn't shy away from it. He said, yeah, I said it. And this is a public figure. This is a guy that, he's the chief of your fire department. And yeah, he's going to have an uproar, but what uproar is he really going to create? It's amazing, Earlier in the show, I talked about the disrespectful acts the ways that you can disrespect the flag. I don't know if anybody's ever really read it. Hopefully you get a chance, click on my link on the page, take a look and see what these disrespectful acts are. One of the disrespectful acts that I never, ever knew, and it's amazing, the act of unveiling the flag across the field. Think about that. We do that every single Sunday. Baseball games, football games, soccer, they unveil it in a vertical, I should say a horizontal, a flat lay. They stretch it out laying horizontally. That is considered disrespectful to the flag. The flag was meant to be vertical so that it waves, not shake, but it waves from hanging vertically. And just little things like that. The Army itself, the Armed Force Academies, the academy schools, when they dress up and put a flag on their helmet as a decorative, is a disrespectful act to the flag. And this was a code that was probably created somewhere like 30, 40, 50 years ago. But this is a code that was created. And like I said, if you get an opportunity a little later today, click on it. It's posted up on my site here on Facebook, Leon Bell. And it shows what some of these disrespectful acts of. Women parading around in flag bikinis, a disrespectful act. But the one thing I found as I was reading these disrespectful acts, the one thing that wasn't there was kneeling. And so as most people have pointed out that it's disrespectful to kneel to the flag, there's nothing disrespectful in it whatsoever. We kneel to Christ. We go down on both knees for him as well as one. So there's nothing disrespectful in that act. So when you're thinking about what people are saying, it's just diverting the attention from what the message was supposed to be. The message was supposed to be from day one about the equality, what keeps us together as people, how to be kind to one another, how to justify some of these police shootings that have been killing so many of our young African American men, as well as other minorities and Caucasians in our community. How are the police able to justify some of their actions? Those were the things he went out to talk about and never got the opportunity. And hopefully over the next days, weeks, months, we can actually start to talk about some of these things. I mentioned the fact that just a day or two ago, I read the fact that a young kid carrying a saxophone, he failed to put a saxophone down, a middle school kid, and he was shot because the saxophone appeared to look like an AK-47. And it just bewilders me when I hear stuff like that, how we as people are allowing these things to happen, but we're not talking about them. These are things that have to be discussed, and we got to get together as a people. We can't continue to point fingers, divert the subject to disrespecting the flag. As I said earlier, there are a lot of things that we can do that you can talk about that are disrespectful to the flag, but kneeling is not one. And what Tomlinson did, I told people earlier as well. In the earlier show, I told people in the mid-'80s, the National Football League, we never stood for the national anthem because we were in the locker room. It wasn't until the mid 80s that the armed force decided that they wanted to pay the National Football League to show patriotism. And by us standing out there, and I say us meaning the NFL players standing out on the line and showing that patriotism towards the flyovers, the thing that the armed forces got from that was higher enrollment. So they paid the National Football League millions of dollars. I think it was something like $7, $8 million per military group. It wasn't like it was just the Army paying them this. It was the Army, the military, the National Guard, the Air Force, the Marines. They were all dipping into their funds and budget, paying the NFL for different things to show patriotism towards the armed forces. And guys, before I get out of here, the last point that I got to make that seems to be lost. How many times does the National Football League player have to stand up and say, look, I love this country. I honor our troops. I respect our troops. It's what they say that matters. Yeah, I mean, the fact that they take a knee to make a non-violent protest, I don't think that's a sign of disrespect. That's my own personal feeling. I know some people are going to jump on me and say, you're wrong, Greg. It's disrespectful to kneel. Um, Many people, as I told you, we used to do the Pledge of Allegiance in the elementary and then junior high and high school. You know, you stand up and you go, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States. That wasn't a national anthem. That was the Pledge of Allegiance. And we still do that as a whole. I know I've gone into many schools over the past year and we did the Pledge of Allegiance and I still have it memorized. Unlike the national anthem, not all the time do I have it 100% memorized. But it's something that we as a people have to come together. And one of the quotes that I said to people is sometimes it's hard for us all to be like Christ. And if we can all strive for that, there's a lot of forgiveness that can be made during that course. And hopefully some of these guys will make that course and be a little bit more forgiving. That's something that I'm not seeing a lot of forgiving attitudes right now. They're just hard attitudes. And it's like, jab, jab, jab. And it's kind of funny. Now we've decided to make all the NFL the bad guys, and Colin Kaepernick's not even being mentioned anymore. It's almost amazing that the guy who started it all, I haven't heard from him. And I'll be honest, at this point in the equation, I like to hear what Colin has to say right now. I think some of the things he wants to voice and wanted to get voiced back a year ago, now is the time that he probably can have the mic and be able to voice it with some reason and not even talk about his present situation because, like anyone will tell you, that's a mute scenario as it is today. The fact that he's no longer in the National Football League playing shows the sacrifice that he was willing to make, and that's what a protest is. A non-violence protest that he demonstrated is another avenue that, I mean, at this point in the equation, I'd like to hear what he has to say about what he's seeing in today's society. What he wanted to hear a year ago, I think, is now coming to light. Hey guys, it's been a fun hour talking with you guys. You've been listening to the Power of Voices. Chime in all day, all night. Listen to Lee, Josefa, the big girls, a little bit of everything you're going to hear right here on thepowerofvoices.com. I'm your host of the Legends Community Show. This is Greg Bell, guys, and I'm signing out this week, and I will see you next week. Take care.
Good show, Greg.